I'll tell you what to expect from this weekend's game against Pittsburgh offensively, defensively, and on special teams. And we'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, good people? Welcome in to another edition of Locked On Jaguars. I am your host, Tony Wiggins, here with your daily Jaguars podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are glad that you make us your first listen and join us here every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Elias. Their app lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head team comparisons. Give yourself the edge this season in the NFL. Find Elias Game Plan in the App Store or Play Store today. We're going to talk about the matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is the very, very important game here as we get to the third. Let me fix this camera a little bit. As we get to the third preseason game, this is the game where there are going to be a lot of people playing extended minutes. So it's going to be a very, very important matchup in terms of figuring out who can do what, where they are. It's going to be the game that's the most like an actual NFL game, an NFL regular season game. So we're going to discuss that. Some homecoming for a former Jaguar. We'll talk about that too. We're going to hit on offense and defense, and then throw in special teams, and then in the third segment, we're going to tie it all together and tell you what you could probably look for and what might happen if you don't get exactly what you want to see this weekend. The game is Saturday in TIAA Bank Field in Jacksonville. Pittsburgh Steelers coming in, and Mike Tomlin. By the way, shout out to Mike Tomlin for something he did yesterday. Look on Twitter, saw some kids fighting, pulled over, invited them to come to Steelers camp the next day and put them through a workout. If you don't get why that's important, I can't help you, but I thought that was a big boy thing. Mike Tomlin is one of my favorite coaches. My favorite coach right now is Doug Peterson because he is the coach of your Jacksonville Jaguars, and they have a really good dress rehearsal game here in the preseason against Pittsburgh. There's some things that line up directly across from some of the questions that we have, and we're about to discuss them right now. Let's go with Trevor Lawrence. What does it mean for Trevor Lawrence? Gives him a chance to play against the defense that's going to probably make him throw the ball and get the ball out quick. Great players in Casey Hayward, TJ Watt up front. They know how to put pressure. They'll stop the run if you try to run the ball and give you a chance or put you in a situation where you really have to be able to throw the ball. And hopefully they play, because this will be a good matchup for whoever lines up at right tackle in that competition between Walker Little and Juwan Taylor. Doug Peterson has already said that Ben Barch will start in place of Tyler Shatley at left guard. So that's an ongoing competition. We'll see if Barch can win that position and win it right out. And what that does is make Shatley, that will make Tyler Shatley the swing offensive lineman on the interior between guard and tackle. Hopefully all of the guys play, including Miles Jack making his return to Jacksonville after being released after so many years with the team. Played well in his first game, and we'll see if he has a little bit of revenge on his mind come Saturday night. It's good that you're going to get the type of team that's going to challenge Jacksonville in some areas that were areas of concern in the past. One of them is the fact that Minkah Fitzpatrick is one of the 3 or 4 best free safeties in the league. He's the quarterback of their defense. It may be a little bit more difficult for Trevor now to make some of those completions that he made last week with the pressure of TJ Watt coming on the outside, the stout presence of Cam Hayward in the middle of that defense, and then the fact that there's a quarterback on the back end, and don't forget about Miles Jack running around doing his thing, and a quarterback of the defense on the back end in Minkah Fitzpatrick. So Always fun to watch what happens when things get ramped up a little bit. I want to see him establish the run tomorrow. I also want to make sure that we highlight the fact that that offensive line needs to show more cohesion. Let's go through the C's. Consistency, cohesion, chemistry. There's one more. I can't think of it, but that's what you want to see tomorrow because they're going to be challenged by the Pittsburgh defense. We get a chance to look at Christian Kirk and see him probably in his first action. If I haven't seen the list of inactives, but if Christian Kirk is able to get out there on the field, it'll give me a chance to get a glance at him and what his skill set is, and also see how that affects all of those targets that Zay Jones got and how aggressive the Jaguars will be to get the ball to them, and plus Evan Ingram. So big test early, going to really show you. Last week, Cleveland held out a lot of starters, especially on defense. So this week, Mike Tomlin has already said that they're going to play a lot of their people and for a long time. So we're going to see how that turns out for the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend. And I think it's a really good test. It's a good chance for us to see them against a real good team. I want to discuss some of the things that the defense, some of the challenges that the defense will have tomorrow. And you can already guess some of the people that I'm going to think about, because I think in some preseason games, you want to see certain matchups more than others. I think both of these matchups for the Jacksonville units, offense and defense, are going to be very telling about where they are right now during this part of the preseason. So all of that's coming up. We're going to discuss that in the second segment. We're going to go over what it's like or what it'll be like for the defense this weekend. And we'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. I got to tell you guys right now, man, about Dave. You want to know what the Dave app is all about? I'm going to give it to you and tell you what the Dave app is all about. You sometimes run into situations where money can be a little bit funny, right? Money can be a little bit funny, and sometimes you need just a little bit of assistance, and you can get it from your future self with the Dave app. That's DAVE. I've had problems in the past, especially when I was younger. I had a bunch of kids in day school, in preschool, all at one time, and there every now and then, money was a little bit short, and I could get money from my own future. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or just catch up on routine bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve and member of FDIC. And I am TWIGG, welcoming you back here to Locked On Jaguars, a little weekend pod edition, getting you ready for the Pittsburgh Steelers to come in with their terrible towels and all of that stuff to TIAA Bank Field to play a very important preseason game against your Jacksonville Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen, and we're glad to be your team every day. We talked about some of the challenges on offense. So before we get to defense, I want to run through the special teams real quick. I want to see if Logan Cook can really kick the ball the way he was kicking in practice. The last time I saw them practice in the stadium, that dude kicked the ball. I thought it was going to Brunswick, man, on a punt. So we're going to see if he can get that done. There's still a battle going on for the place kicker position. Kicker is still an issue here in Jacksonville. We're going to make sure that whoever they got over there as the front runner right now is good enough, because that's a problem you do not want to have that will cost you games that you can win when you get into the postseason. They worked a lot, too, on coverage, on punt coverage. Took a lot of pride in making sure that gunner got back in bounds. There was a big emphasis on that. And you saw a lot of the DBs and a lot of the coaches really going hard when it came to punt coverage and the punt teams the other day. Jamal Agnew is the return guy. We all know that. I don't know how much action he's going to get, but if he doesn't, or if he does or doesn't, they still have to figure out who they're going to actually use back there. And so far, it's been 14. 14 has been back there and been doing a pretty good job of keeping his hands on the ball. So now let's get to some of these defensive matchups for the Jaguars. I want to see the defensive line of the Jaguars dominate, because Pittsburgh's offensive line has really been one of those things for them that's been a little bit of Achilles heel over the past couple of years. And I know they've been addressing it in the draft, but it's not like the line that you're going against is as good as the two that you went against already in Oakland as well as Cleveland. So I want them to have that dominant performance tomorrow. The first thing they're going to have to do, though, in order to get to where you're harassing whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Mr. Trubisky or the rookie Kenny Pickett, before you even get to that, you have to stop the run. That means you got to deal with that guy. That's right. Pittsburgh has one of the best young running backs in Najee Harris. He's big, he's physical. They really depend on him. He sort of embodies what they want to be and who they want to be. Almost, not quite, but almost sort of Derrick Henry-like is the kind of impact that he has on the Steelers offense. Whoever the quarterback is, you want to pressure him, you want to make him run for your life, but if you can't stop the run, you're going to get in trouble. Najee Harris, and stopping Najee Harris is extremely important. They did a good job against Cleveland's running backs last week. We're going to see if they can do the same thing to Najee Harris. The biggest test, I believe, for Jacksonville, and by the way, Pat Freiermuth, their tight end, a lot of people thought he should have been here in Jacksonville. Jacksonville passed him up last year. I wonder if he got a little chip on his shoulder. I would be chippy like that. His old tight ends coach at Penn State was here, and they bypassed him and chose Walker Little. So I wonder if Pat Freiermuth has a little bit of a, I'm going to show you what you're missing in his system. But the biggest test is the wide receivers being guarded by the Jaguars secondary. Jack secondary last week played really well. Different challenges this week with Chase Claypool, George Pickens, who is the front runner right now on betonline.net to be the rookie of the year. Those are two big, tall receivers. And then they have Deontay Thompson, not Deontay Thompson, but number 18, they have him, who is their main target in the slot and catching all of the balls. So it's going to be a tough sled for Jacksonville tomorrow if they are going to really need to show their dominance, and they're going to really need to put forth their best effort to actually stop those receivers. Now, one of the ways you can stop the receivers, you stop the quarterback, right? That sort of goes hand in hand. You stop the receivers, you stop the quarterback, the receivers aren't going to be very good. The way you stop the quarterback is by getting pressure. I want to see if they can get interior pressure. I know they can get pressure on the outside. I want to see if they can get interior pressure on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and to be able to do it without blitzing. And the way that you do that is control the down and distance on first and second down, and then go to your package where you have guys like Arden Key and Dwan Smoot with Trevon Walker as well as Josh Allen. If you sell out too much to try to get sacks and pressure the quarterback early, you can give up and get gashed in the running game. You can give up some stuff in the running game. So I'm just interested to see if the Jaguars can hold up against Pittsburgh's strengths, which are the wide receivers, as we've mentioned here, running back, and their commitment to the run, as well to be able to block TJ Watt, try to move Cam Hayward in the middle of that line, and avoid making a costly mistake to Minkah Fitzpatrick. Those are the things that I'm looking for the most, and I'm hoping that it turns out. I'm going to give you some predictions, some things that I think will happen in the game. And after I give you things that I believe will happen in the game, what I'm going to do is give you the scenarios and tell you what's going to happen if those things don't happen. But first, before we go into segment 3, I got to remind you about the Locked On Fantasy Football. Locked On Fantasy Football with Vinny Iyer is the quintessential fantasy football guru. It is on the Locked On Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you tap in to get your drafts right. And you don't want to be the laughing stock of your fantasy football season. So make sure you check into the Locked On, or check in with and like and subscribe the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast with the great Vinny Iyer. All right, we're going to tell you everything that we think is going to happen and how we're going to proceed and move forward. And we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars after I tell you guys about BetterHelp. Listen, man, please. What you need sometimes is professional therapy. Do not try to self-diagnose. I've done that, and it doesn't work for me all the time. So this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Talk about a time when you're going through trouble. You can talk about those things with real professional help, and it's all just a click away. You know, life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through it all. It's not a crisis hotline. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And you can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. It has to be a real tremendous burden off your shoulder to know that you can do that. Visit their website and read their testimonials. They're all posted daily. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. And they have a special offer for our listeners here where you get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy, real professional therapy at BetterHelp. That's HELP.com/lockedon. And we thank you once again for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars and giving us the chance every single day and the opportunity to bring some Jaguar joy into your life and let you know everything we can tell you about the team. We do that because it's your team every day. Are you guys fatigued yet with preseason? We go through these stages where we're jonesing for football. We just want practice and mini camp. We want to see them on the field. We want to see what they look like under the lights. We want to see them in a uniform. And then we stop watching the games. I got a feeling that this week's game against Pittsburgh, which is their third preseason game, technically they open up the Hall of Fame game. This is their second of 3 normal preseason games. This is the one that's going to keep your attention for a little bit longer. One next week might not, although the game next week is when you'll see a lot of the guys that are battling for positions. They'll get most of the reps, and that's where you'll probably find your last 6 or 7 guys that are trying to make the roster. This week, no, this is almost simulation week. This is almost the week that is your dress rehearsal for the regular season. So you usually see teams do a little bit more of some of the things that they want to try to implement and see. This is a good time to see what you really are good at and what you're not good at, so they'll have those last 2 or 3 weeks to really work it out before the season starts. Things might not go the Jaguars' way. If they don't, no harm, no foul. I think Pittsburgh is a decent team in certain spots, and some of those spots that we highlighted earlier are things that where the Jaguars still have some questions. They're always going to be well coached because Mike Tomlin he's a swell coach. He's one of the best coaches in the National Football League. A Hall of Famer, if it stops right now, Mike Tomlin will go to Canton and have his bust there. So, in my opinion, tomorrow's important, but it's not a total deal breaker. It's not one of those situations that and I'm not trying to be the dude that's hedging my bets here, But it's also not a situation where if things don't go the way you want them to go, that means that the season is all for naught. Especially if the things that you see that you don't like are things that are totally correctable, like turnovers. Those things don't happen all the time, and you can have a bad game and have 2 or 3 missed opportunities or situations where you turn the ball over, and it makes you look worse than you really are when you're not going to turn the ball over that many times every single week. So you don't want that, and you don't want silly penalties. You also don't want uh, just to have the Murphy's Law where everything that can go wrong consistently goes wrong. You miss kicks, you get kicks blocked, you fumble a snap, you do all of these uncharacteristic things that don't really give you a chance to figure out and measure where you are as a football team. It doesn't. So it'll be one of those games. You don't want one of those games where a coach just go, we're going to just put this one behind us, because those things happen sometimes. You remember the Patriots lost like 41-6 or something to the Bengals they lost to somebody. It might have been Kansas City. I don't know who it was. And Belichick just goes on to Cincinnati because Cincinnati was the next game. I mean, it looked horrible. He just said on to Cincinnati. That's what I mean. And by the way, they won the championship that year. So that night, it felt like everything was just the worst it could possibly be. That team ended up being a championship team. The reason why I think, in my opinion, he was saying on to Cincinnati is because there was nothing probative you could get. They just had an off night. It wasn't going to be like that all the time. There's nothing you're going to juxtapose or get out of that game that's going to help you. It's just like, man, we just going to forget about this one. It just wasn't our night. I don't want that to happen to Jacksonville, because if that happens to Jacksonville, a lot of conclusions will be jumped to. A lot of enthusiasm will go away. And those games are never really a picture or an illustration of who you actually really are as a football team. If things go remarkably well, you can be as enthusiastic as you want to, but you still have to temper that down a little bit, because you don't know how vanilla Pittsburgh was playing. And even though they're playing a lot of people, just like Jacksonville tomorrow, you still don't know if they're a good football team or not. I think they might be, but they have questions at quarterback. So you don't want to get too high. You don't want to get too low. You want to kind of stay flat and unflappable and not be overly hyped about anything that you see that's good, or overly disappointed about anything that you see is bad. I think they have a pretty good showing tomorrow night. I think Trevor Lawrence will use this time to acclimate himself to a lot of receivers. I think what he's going to do is use his legs sometimes and get away from Watt, because I think TJ Watt, if he plays, is going to be coming and trying to get himself into regular season shape. All right, man, that's going to do it for this weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll try to get instant reaction done after the game. If anything special or anything out of the ordinary happens, we'll have it right here for you here on Locked On Jaguars, because that's what we do with your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. Do what I always say. Y'all take care of each other, and we'll see you tomorrow.